Are you done? Are you just going to keep?
Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. Over the last 24 hours, I've gotten a lot of comments on my channel, of course, about the illness of Lori Vallow Daybell, who decided to delay jury selection in her trial in conspiracy against Brandon Boudreaux because she's not feeling well. Now, lots of people have speculated, is she actually sick? Is she faking it? What about the wheelchair that was over the top? Well, we're going to go through the FTR together right now, and I'm going to point out some things that I think are important to note. First of all, Lori was carrying a Kleenex around with her on Thursday and Friday last week when jury selection began. She did mention that she hadn't been feeling well all weekend, so I do think that there is a modicum of truth to what she's saying. She may very well be sick. And I also want to point out that sometimes the jail or hospitals or other institutions will insist that a patient be in a wheelchair to avoid liability on their part. With those couple of things in mind, let's get started. Now, I realize that the video quality is not that great in this video because it comes from the court's video feed, but it does have closed captioning, so hopefully we'll be able to catch everything that gets said.
Time set for continuing jury selection, State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2022-001242. Appearances, please.
Trina Kay on behalf of the state and for the record, the victim is in the victim room.
All right. Ms. Daybell?
No, in the courtroom, sorry.
Lori Daybell for the defense.
All right.
So you can already hear that she's speaking in a very weak voice, and it's hard to see, but the judge is here in the upper left corner, Trina Kay is over here in the upper right corner, and Lori Daybell is down here in the lower corner, and it's just hard to see, but she is in a wheelchair.
Are we ready to proceed with jury selection?
No,
Why not?
I'm sick, Your Honor. I've been sick all weekend. I let my team know yesterday I was sick.
Can you please pull the microphone a little closer? I can't hear you very well.
I'm sick. I've been sick.
Have you put in tank orders to get treatment?
Yes.
So tank orders refer to court orders that direct a detention facility to address a defendant's illness during trial, such as providing medical care or other accommodations. Usually the court would handle a situation by ordering a medical report or granting continuances for recovery, and sometimes issuing supervision for severe cases. However, the jail that Lori is in has an infirmary. She's isolated anyway in a cell by herself, and so it's not likely they would move her to an infirmary for a situation like this.
Are you being housed in the infirmary?
Nope. I'm housed where they put people in quarantine anyway. I'm housed alone. They would not move me from where I am.
Have they tested you for any communicable diseases?
No.
All right.
Judge Boudreaux is making notes, and he's thinking, sorry, the background noise that you can hear is people coming into the courtroom. And we know that a lot of the reporters who were covering the trial were not present for the very beginning of this. And you can see them filing into the courtroom in the back of the screen there.
I know yesterday at 9 a.m. that I was still very ill.
Sometimes we're in positions where we have to proceed when we feel under the weather.
It's not just under the weather. I'm very ill.
So Judge Boudreaux responds in the way that a parent would respond to a child. I remember having to tell my kids lots of times growing up that I know you don't feel 100%, but sometimes you have to go to school even when you only feel 80% or sometimes 70%. There's not a lot you can do. If you stay at home, you're not necessarily going to feel better, and you might as well be in school getting your work done rather than having to make things up later. I feel like this is what Judge Boudreaux is telling Lori.
Do you have copies of tank orders you put in for treatment?
Not with me. I put it in on the tablet.
Is the DO able to check whether any tank orders were put in?
I pulled the other judge, but I don't know when she put it in.
What's that?
I think it takes about 24 hours.
They haven't even answered my tank order yet.
So it's hard to hear the gentleman in the back. He's one of the officers that is escorting Lori, and he says usually it takes them 24 hours to get a tank order executed. Judge Boreski is really considering what to do here.
So what symptoms are you having?
I have a terrible headache. I have nausea. I have chills. I have a fever probably. I haven't been able to keep very much down besides broth and oranges.
So Lori hesitates when the judge asks her what her symptoms are, almost as if she's thinking about which symptoms to say first or which symptoms she has that might be the most concerning. She says she probably has a fever, which tells me nobody's checked to see if she has a fever. Judge Boreski thinking hard about all the implications of what this could mean for the trial.
Would you be willing to have one of your advisory councils complete the 40-year process, jury selection?
Would that waive my ability to represent myself for the rest of the trial?
No.
Then can I have a moment to discuss with them for a second?
Her voice here really sounds to me like she's trying to sound ill, or at least more ill than she actually is.
A couple things. I'm your trial judge. My instructions are to complete your second trial. So even if for some reason your sickness worsened and we weren't able to complete this trial and had to declare a mistrial as this trial, even if this case got delayed into June or July or August to be reset, I'd still be your trial judge.
I think it's really smart of Judge Boreski to assert this here. He's got Lori's number. He knows exactly what she's trying to do. And he wants to reiterate to her that no matter what happens, he's going to be her trial judge. So he doesn't want her going back and talking to her advisory council and coming up with some kind of a plan to delay the trial even farther because of this illness. Because it doesn't matter how long she delays with the illness, he's still going to be her judge.
Additionally, last time we did jury selection in your first trial, as I recall, you asked between probably about 5 and 10 minutes of follow-up questions of the panel before we sat the jury. I only mention that in the context of not a lot of it is expected of you at this point in the trial. Depending on how you're feeling later, we could talk about whether the opening statements would have to be further bumped to tomorrow. But I would like to keep this trial on track. So if you want a few minutes to talk to your advisory council, we can do that. Is there anything the state wants to put on the record before we do that?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Do you want to do that back in the tank?
Now they're back in the courtroom after she's conferred with her advisory council.
All right, we're back on the record. State of Arizona versus Daybell, CR 2022-001242. The state is present. The defendant is present. Ms. Daybell.
I did discuss with my advisory council. They are not comfortable doing that. I do have a right to represent myself. I'm sorry that I'm sick. I did not plan on getting sick. I did not try to get sick. This isn't anything to do with anything other than the fact that I'm incapable of going forward and doing a good job representing myself.
I just want to point out that her voice right now is very different than it was when she first started speaking to the judge at the beginning of this hearing. Let's go back and compare the two.
Proceed when we feel under the weather.
It's not just under the weather. I'm very ill. Would that waive my ability to represent myself for the rest of the trial?
242, the state is present, the defendant is present. Ms. Daybell.
I did discuss with my advisory council. They are not comfortable doing that. I do have a right to represent myself. I'm sorry that I'm sick. I did not plan on getting sick. I did not try to get sick. This isn't anything to do with anything other than the fact that I'm incapable of going forward and doing a good job representing myself. I've been incarcerated for over 5.5 years. I've only ever been sick one other time in the whole time I've been here.
All right. State want to be heard?
Judge, obviously, if the defendant is sick and she does have a right to represent herself, we understand that. The concern is the state does need a date certain when we're starting. I have witnesses that I rescheduled already once to fly in this week, assuming we were starting today. I obviously will need to reschedule them again. I can't keep rescheduling them every single day onto a new flight. So I am not sure how we want to proceed at this time. If we want to give the defendant a couple days, see if this jury is available to extend out to the 25th. I know we had originally talked about that, and begin on Wednesday. I don't know if she'll feel better by then, but that's the only suggestion I have at this time, other than starting all over again at another date.
Is there a reason I couldn't proceed with some of the oral voir dire this morning? Because other than introducing herself, she wouldn't be expected to do anything this morning. And that way we can at least get rid of some of the jurors that, for whatever reason, would need to be excused.
Judge, my concern is she's in a wheelchair now.
Well, I would probably ask to have her sit in a regular seat and not be in a wheelchair that says MCSO across the back of it.
No, I am just not capable of going or even sitting here. I need to be laying down. I need to be getting better so that I can go forward and actually represent myself. I hope that I feel better this week and we can go forward. I can't give you any promises. I can't control any of this.
I've mentioned this before, but when Lori said, I can't control any of this, I think that may be the one very true statement that we're hearing her say this morning. She feels out of control. Her motions to have Judge Boreski removed were denied, and all of her other motions to have her case dismissed were denied. She realizes that she's out of control in the courtroom. She has to follow the rules of procedure, but she doesn't realize, she doesn't know the law well enough to argue facts that are actually going to help her case. She feels like she's completely out of her depth here. And her being sick, she's not in control of that either, but she can, to a certain degree, control how she's perceived. She doesn't want to introduce herself to the jury in this weakened condition. And she knows that if she drags this out a little bit, that's her one way of exerting control over this situation where she has completely lost it.
All right, I'll take the state's suggestion and try to salvage this jury in this trial. I'm sure these jurors are going to be none too happy coming down today again for a dry run.
Judge, I do have one other. I don't know if we're able to, and I understand this is Judge Kemp's courtroom. We can start earlier for the rest of the week and next week at 10, maybe take an hour for lunch. It's just ways to try to.
Yeah, I would be willing to do that. So for Friday, I have nothing else and Judge Kemp has nothing. We could start at 9 on Friday.
And I know we have at least one juror that we will have to excuse who was going camping on Friday.
Juror number 4, I think.
Yeah.
I want to point out that this is the longest that I've ever seen Judge Boreski take a pause and really consider what he wants to do in this matter. He's being very careful to consider all of the angles and all of the implications, and I really appreciate his thoughtful approach.
My schedule, we could start at 10 on Wednesday. Let me check Judge Kemp's courtroom schedule. I think he looks like he'll be done by 9:30 at the latest. So I think we'd be safe on telling the jurors to come back 10 a.m. Wednesday, get the jury picked, opening statements done. All right, I think I do need to bring the jurors in to tell them something. So can we have Ms. Daybell sit in a regular chair and not, and bring the wheelchair out into the hallway?
Yeah, try and fix one.
So it's kind of hard to see, but at this point, the officer that's escorting Lori goes over to the defense desk and prepares the chair next to her, thinking that Lori's going to get up and move to the regular chair. Then he goes behind the wheelchair to hold it in place so that she can move.
I don't think that I can even sit here. I need to go lay down. I don't understand. I don't think, last time you said it was going to be 15 minutes, it was an hour and a half where I was sitting here trying not to throw up on TV in front of the jurors.
Which maybe we could, all of us leave and they could come in and just speak with you.
Now, this shows a level of graciousness on Trina Kay's part that I was honestly surprised by. She's got to be feeling super frustrated dealing with this pro-per client who's already engaged in so many shenanigans during this trial, but she actually graciously offers that she can also leave the courtroom. They can all leave the courtroom, and then the judge can address the jury with neither of the parties present. Of course, it wouldn't be appropriate for the judge to address the jury without the defendant present. That would raise some questions and maybe create some bias in the minds of the jury already. So in order to be completely impartial, Trina Kay is the one who offers to leave. Now, for any of you who thought Lori might really be sick, it's possible she could actually be sick. However, if she's well enough to sit up in the wheelchair, she's well enough to sit up in a regular chair as well. She said, last time you said it would only take 15 minutes and it was an hour and a half, and I was trying not to throw up on the jury. She's really making a mountain out of a molehill on this one. She could sit in the chair for 5 minutes while the judge gives the jury some instructions and then excuses all of the parties. So whether or not she's actually sick and whether or not the wheelchair was given to her or she asked for it, this type of histrionic is above and beyond. She can't even move from the wheelchair to sit in a regular chair for 5 minutes. Come on.
That's fine.
I've had that happen before where none of the parties are here and the court just advises that we're unable to
Okay.
Your Honor, I don't know about you rescheduling this for Wednesday. It puts a lot of pressure on me to be better and ready for Wednesday. And if I'm not, I don't like to disappoint people. I don't like putting people out of their way, all the jurors and all these things, and all the pressure is on me. That's not going to help me get any better anytime soon.
What is your suggestion?
Now, we can't see the judge's face, but we hear that sharp exhale. He's very frustrated with this whole situation. And this is the part where I really want to point out. Lori says she doesn't like inconveniencing people. She doesn't want to take up the jury's time, etc. Well, what about your victims, Lori? She never had this much care or concern for any of them. And that's what's infuriating about this behavior to me.
I don't know, but I'm saying so tomorrow, if I'm not better and I let my team know, are you going to drag me in here like you did today with the team that came to get me? Do you know they felt so sorry for me to have to get dragged out of bed to be here?
She's nearly in tears. At least she sounds like she's nearly in tears. And she wants to make sure the judge knows how much the people felt sorry for her when they had to, quote, drag her out of bed.
The answer is yes. I probably will order that you be here Wednesday. We'll take tomorrow off. Because I need to confirm how you're feeling. You because you represent yourself, no one else can waive your own appearance.
You're welcome to come over to the jail and come to my cell and see how I'm doing in there.
All right, I'll take a pass on that.
Once again, Judge Boreski with the iconic mic drop moment. I'll take a pass on that.
All right, I'll take a pass on that. All right, with the consent of the parties, then we'll have the parties exit. I'm going to tell the jury we're going to try to get this done on Wednesday. Obviously, that depends on whether the defendant's feeling better or not. We will, I'll I'll tell them to be here ready to go at 10 a.m. Wednesday unless they hear something else.
So with another sharp exhale from Judge Boreski, he excuses the parties and brought the jury back in, instructing them not to look up the case and to come back on Wednesday morning. He said this has never happened in his entire career, and he apologized to the jury, saying that he was embarrassed to even have to say this and offering to make it up to them by buying them donuts. If I had been in the jury room, I don't think donuts would have done it for me. But I do appreciate these people being willing to follow the admonishment, to not look things up, and to come back on Wednesday, having a day off in between. Now, we know that in her first trial, the judge noted that Lori Vallow Daybell was diagnosed with hyperreligiosity, delusional disorder, and histrionic traits. I want to read some of the traits of that diagnosis for you so that we can apply them to what might be going on with her behavior here. Delusional disorder is characterized by fixed false beliefs or delusions that persist for at least 1 month, without other prominent psychotic symptoms like hallucinations. The delusions are often plausible but not shared by others in the person's cultural or social group. In Lori's case, the delusions are specified as involving hyperreligiosity, meaning they center on exaggerated religious themes. The traits she might exhibit are fixed religious beliefs, unshakable convictions about religious or apocalyptic events, such as believing she has a divine mission, which we've heard her say, she's a chosen figure or a prophet, or a translated being in this case, or that specific people are part of a cosmic or spiritual battle. Her beliefs might seem plausible within a religious context, but they're rigidly held despite evidence to the contrary. When challenged, she might become defensive or elaborate on her beliefs, presenting them as factual. She could cite religious texts or personal revelations to justify her actions. She might show no awareness that her beliefs are delusional, maintaining their truth even when confronted with contradictory evidence. Apart from her religious convictions, she might appear relatively normal in affect or behavior, with no overt signs of disorganized thinking or severe mood swings typical of other disorders. Hyperreligiosity might include an idea of moral superiority, a belief that her actions, no matter how extreme, are morally justified because they align with the divine plan. She might express disdain for secular authorities, for example, the court, as lacking spiritual understanding. Her hyper-religiosity may also include the idea of selective interpretation, meaning she would interpret everyday events or evidence through a religious lens, such as viewing legal proceedings as a test of faith or part of her cosmic struggle. Histrionic traits are not necessarily a full diagnosis of histrionic personality disorder, and they may involve a pattern of excessive emotionality and attention-seeking behavior. These traits can manifest in dramatic, theatrical, or exaggerated ways, often to draw focus to her or to gain sympathy for her plight. Her dramatic emotional displays may seem out of context for the situation in which they occur. They might seem disproportionate to the situation at hand. She may present herself as overly charismatic or overly friendly to gain favor, possibly with jurors, attorneys, or the judge. She might use flirtatious or ingratiating behavior to influence perceptions of her. She might have rapidly shifting emotions, quick changes in mood, such as moving from tearful to composed or defiant, which can appear manipulative or inconsistent. Finally, she may portray herself as a victim, a martyr, or spiritually enlightened figure to elicit sympathy or admiration. She might emphasize her role as a devoted mother or religious figure, despite all evidence to the contrary. So, of course, I'm not a clinician of any kind. I don't have a background in mental health, except for the research that I've done in my own conditions of CPTSD and former depression and anxiety. However, the theme that I see in personality disorders is a rigidity or an inability to change or to be flexible in the face of changing circumstances. And that's certainly what we've seen from Lori. Despite all the evidence that's presented in court, all of the testimony and the forensic evidence and the science behind the facts that have been presented, she just absolutely refused to accept a narrative that's different from her own. It'll be interesting to see what happens on Wednesday when she turns up to court, as she is going to be ordered to turn up in court, and see how her demeanor changes. Will she have taken the time to rest and recharge, still exhibiting some signs of illness but feeling much better? as she's going to have to introduce herself to this jury. And I doubt that the first impression she wants to give them is that she is sickly and frail. We've always known Lori to want to present herself to be intelligent, in command, and powerful. I do have an e-course where I teach people how to spot manipulation and control and how to defend against it. You can get that information at my website at third-verse.com. In the meantime, I'm going to be streaming the trial and reporting every single day. I hope you'll join me here. Take care.